Welcome, everyone, to another BOLDcast discussion. I'm Carson.
I'm Lindsay.
And this, it didn't switch.
I'm Lindsay.
That's Lindsay. And this is me. And this is our discussion for the second part, roughly speaking, of the Chimera Ant arc of Hunter x Hunter. Specifically, episodes 86 to 108. Spoilers for Hunter x Hunter. If you have not seen Hunter x Hunter, please leave right now because I'm about to spoil what happens in this part of the story. So this takes place between just after Kite's death to Gungi X and X Komugi. So the episode where the Ant King saves Komugi from a bird that is attacking her. So that's a big swath of episodes. We could have divided it up a little bit better, but I think it's actually a good spot to encapsulate everything. So, because the first little area is the prologue of the arc, where it's all about like Gon, Killua, and Kite going in, learning about the ants being born, them developing humanity, them getting names, them and the morality of everything and all of this stuff, and then Kite dies, and then this part of the arc starts, where it's all the training arc, learning about Knuckle and Shoot. The Ant King is born. We meet Palm. We learn a little bit more about Nav and Morel. We learn about them throughout the whole arc. And then that's sort of the first half of this part, and then the second half is more focused on the Ant King and infiltrating NGL and beginning the whole operation. Sort of this whole part of the story is setting the stage for this the next part, which is going to be the last part of the arc. So what based on what you thought of the first one? The first part, I know you weren't super gelling with it as much. You didn't feel like it was as consistent with the rest of the series. Do you still feel that way? Do you feel like that's changed, or is it kind of the same and it's kind of its own thing? And or how do you feel in comparison to that first part?
I think that the more this arc has gone on, the more that I've liked it, and the more that I've like felt that everything is like working in its favor. In a way, I felt like at the beginning, and in the first part of this, it was just kind of, it felt like it was very bloated. It was dealing with a lot of ideas and like expressing that through many, many different ants. And I don't know, it felt like a lot of things were happening, but they were kind of separate from like, the main characters, and like they were doing their own thing. But I don't know. It also just felt kind of slow in a way, and
the first part,
yeah, like
really, and it was super intense. I feel like this last part was way slower, but we also it's difficult. It's a difficult thing because we broke it up over so much time.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's like I'm not saying that it was slow. I'm saying I guess just that it felt that way. I mean, it's just that there was so much setup, and like, I don't know. I don't know what it was about it, but what
about this part?
I wasn't a huge fan. So yeah. But compared to this, I felt like as it's gone on, it's gotten better. I felt that we have dialed it back, gotten rid of a bunch of the ants that I didn't care about and I was never going to care about. We had some cool moments with the Phantom Troop coming in, which was cool as well. And I did like that because it kind of broke it up a little bit. And then I've really liked the most recent bit where it's focused more on everyone working together, kind of devising the plan. The king, like, basically kind of going through what a lot of the other ants already went through of, like, gaining more humanity, or, like, realizing that he's caring about things that he's, like, not supposed to, or, just, like, feelings, basically. He's like the Grinch when he, discovers that he doesn't hate everything. And I felt like this part of the story has been more compelling because I felt at least that it's been a little bit more focused, and, like, a lot of the characters have already been established, and when we learn new things about them or see them in action, it's a lot more interesting, Like, I felt like in the first bit, the only person that I was really interested in was Colt and Kite. Those were, like, the two characters that I was interested in, and then now it feels like I'm interested in everyone, you know, like I'm interested in Nava Morel. I'm interested in Palm. I'm, you know, all of the guards, not really the red guy. I don't really care about him too much, but, Pito and Poof, I'm interested in. I want to see more of them. I'm interested in the king. I'm interested in, what is her name? We just learned it.
Pito? Oh, Komugi.
I'm like all of that and all of their relationships with each other are really like it's just cool to watch, and I'm excited to see more of it, basically. Whereas in the beginning, I was kind of like, cool, this ant arc, I'm not like, I don't care whether I see more of it or not a lot of the time, you know. I just felt like as things have been going on, it's like it makes me want to watch more.
Yeah, this whole part. There is a lot of setup, and that's one question from Ty Likes Pie. While this arc never feels overly slow to me, how are you enjoying the pace and story arc and story so far this arc? And then a second half is, in which ways do you feel the ants and Gon's humanity overlap? Sometimes it feels like Gon is not so far off from the behavior of the ants. I feel like, yeah, that's a good kind of segue, because you're talking about more character-based stuff as opposed to just the ants. Is it time for another classic Lindsay, Gon is a psychopath? We also, well, this was last arc, or last part of the arc, but there was that, I just edited the episode where they go in for the first time to NGL, and we get the brain scan of Gon and Killua side by side, and Killua's brain is like very sharp and like filled out, and then there's some dark spots on Gon's brain scan, so indicating that he is a psychopath.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. But what do you think of Gon's morality?
I think it's interesting, and it's also interesting. The last episode that we just watched, I think, or maybe the one before, we were talking about how in the ending, Gon and Killua have kind of had a switch up in the way that they're portrayed, just like in the two visuals. Gon, where he's like all in the red and he looks very determined, like he's about to fight, and then Killua just like kind of chilling, really
sad.
Oh yeah, like he's just kind of there and like looks like, you know, a little bit down. And I think that that's really interesting. And we were talking a bit of how their characters have kind of switched around a little bit, and Gon throughout this arc has just been leaning more and more into, I don't know, like in a way he has, in a way he hasn't, but it seems like he's not all sunshine and rainbows that he used to be. He's not the same guy, but at the same time he is, and that's
the same guy.
That's what makes it really interesting to think about, because he is still the kind of guy who would, you know, go up to Killua and be like, hey, let's be best friends. He's still that guy. But at the same time, we've seen just more and more instances of him being absolutely brutal and not caring, and just like flying off the handle at like someone's offhanded comment, essentially. Like the ants will be like, oh, I don't care about that guy. And then he's like, you don't even care about your friends? Yeah, you all deserve to die. Every single one of you.
And that was, by the way, before Kite died, right?
Yeah, but I guess, yeah, that is.
So it's not like, oh, Kite died and that really changed Gon.
Yeah.
He was like that before, so it's like, you know, it's not even really a new Gon. He's definitely influenced by what happened to Kite and everything, clearly, based on the scene where they recover Kite's body earlier in this part of the show. That did happen in the part we're supposed to be talking about. You know, yeah, it's he's definitely affected by it, but like, yeah, he's definitely not new, and that's what's scary about it.
Yeah, I think that that's what's interesting, and I think it's also just maybe that the show is focusing on it a little bit more, because it was always there, and that is what's interesting to me. And that sometimes I talk about I wonder if in the previous edition, whenever it was made in the 90s or something,
this part was not animated in the 90s show.
I'm not saying this part in particular, just the tone of the show in general. I've heard that it's like a darker tone to it. So I often get curious if it's maybe more like this from the start, more explicit of showing Gon's tendencies towards just being unnecessarily violent or cruel, or just like, and that's the other thing, is like he can so easily like sever something from being at all related to himself. He can so easily just be like, these things are not like me, and therefore I can kill them. And that's kind of relates back to where he's like, how can you kill people who have nothing to do with you? But then at the same time, he finds it, once he realizes he can't relate to these ants, he can like throw down a wall and be like, you are the other, and I can do whatever I want to you because you don't align with my views. I just thought of that, how that kind of relates of like, how can you kill people who have nothing to do with you? It's like, well, that seems to be what you can do.
Yeah.
Very easily. That seems that,
maybe he asked Crollo because he was curious, because he wanted to know how do you do it? How do you do it? How do you kill people who have nothing to do with you? I'm so curious. Can I pick your brain on how you kill people who have nothing to do with you? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. But yeah, it is interesting, and the whole show is kind of a little bit more darker. Like we're things are presented in a different way, you know, as compared to previous arcs.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think it's just that Gon. This is the first time Gon is personally invested. Like it's hard to say whether it's the presentation. Like it is, but it's not like, you know, oh, they flipped the dark switch and now everything's dark. It's just kind of like how Greed Island focused on, you know, people outside of Gon doing the same things that Gon does, but without the plucky music and, you know, like it would be in real life, like with the bombers, like trapping these guys and forcing them to roll the risky dice and then blowing their faces off and shit like that. Like, it's just as gruesome as everything that was happening in the Hunter exam, but it's just shown in from a different perspective that makes it seem more extreme than it did before. And in this case, it's a similar issue of perspective where, you know, we're not viewing it just from Gon or from people around Gon. We're viewing it from the perspective of the ants, or from the perspective of the villagers who are being attacked, and it's just very interesting because it's an interesting perspective, but it's also just how close it is to Gon, because there, you know, it feels like the more personal what's going on is to Gon, the more brutal he is. Because in Hunter exam arc, it's like he really wanted to be a hunter, but you know, he didn't have anything against anyone else necessarily. And in Greed Island, it was his dad's game, and that's when he got kind of like childish, when at the start of Greed Island, everybody was like, you know, oh, this game is terrible. This is a game from hell. Like, people are dying, people are killing each other for this, and for what? And then he's just like, I don't want to work with you. I hate you guys. I'm leaving right now. He gets actually upset and mad, and then is like, sorry, Killua. I just couldn't be with those guys while they were shit talking my dad's game. I just can't do it. And it's like, he's not really examining what they're saying. He's just taking it very personally. And I think that that's the big difference with Gon, is that he's not acting really any differently than he was. He's just being fed more personal situations. It's directly related to him, and he has a vested interest, and that's making him react in more volatile, seemingly more volatile ways, even though, you know, the show itself is not actually necessarily more violent, definitely not more violent than York knew, and definitely not, I don't think, darker than York knew. It's a little bit freakier because there's an aliens attack element to the ants, but, you know, first few episodes of the York New arc, we see a ballroom full of like hundreds of people get gunned down by the fandom troop, who end up being our best friends later. Like, you know, by the end of it, we end up really liking them. So, but the issue is with that is it doesn't feel as, like, looking back, it doesn't feel as dark necessarily when you're viewing Gon's side of the thing, because he's not personally connected to it. He doesn't really care about the Phantom Troop being evil at all, except for one scene where he's like arm wrestling with Nobunaga, right? So like, and that's where he gets pissed off, and he's just like, you know, if you care so much about your friend, why don't you care about all the people you've killed, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, it does make sense that he would be hypocritical about that going into this arc, because he's a child and he hasn't thought through all this shit. It's just, it's interesting how, he seems very, like, going into the first arc and into the Hunter exam, he seems very principled and very optimistic, and like this ray of hope, very Hinata-esque, like Hinata from Haikyuu type archetype. But it's just the more personally invested he is, it seems like the darker he gets, and the more tested he is about any kind of conviction, the more hypocritical he is, and the more not even conflicted he is about being hypocritical. He just is hypocritical because he's a kid and he makes decisions based on his feelings at the moment, and he can act very irrationally. And I think that's where the source of the weirdness comes from, because it feels a little bit too real. That's where Gon feels like a really good character. He's morally interesting in that way because he's realistic. People make decisions like that in real life.
It is interesting as well when you talk about it. It's like, yeah, he is just a kid, and it's like, this is like the realistic story of what would happen if a child was like had superpowers, essentially.
Right.
It's like they might just kill someone. They might just kill their friend one day, or they might just kids, because, and specifically Gon has like this thing where it's like they can just be like the most happy person ever, and then they just basically get tired, or like, something happens and their emotions get thrown out of whack. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to cope with that. So they throw a temper tantrum, essentially, and they just lash out at whatever's around them.
Yeah.
And that it is kind of interesting because that's not usually something that's ever talked about or explored in any way, of just like, a kid who just doesn't have a handle on himself.
Yeah.
But is super powerful, can kill someone with a punch.
Yeah. It's usually like the opposite. It's usually like the kid gains power when he accepts responsibility, or when he gets a handle on his emotions, or when he I think of Gohan in Dragon Ball Z. Like he's weak. But he has a lot of potential. He perhaps has more potential than his dad. And only when he's like pushed to the breaking point does he explode and then get that, where he's like, I don't know, he kind of grows up and accepts the burden of his power, and accepts the circumstances as they are, and that's when he kind of evolves. But with Gon, it's he just kind of is special from the get-go and evolves naturally, or not even naturally, as a course of like training, and he just is more powerful. And what do you do? What happens when one of the most powerful people is someone who hasn't gotten power through harsh discipline and grown as a person through that, and gain power through that? Because that's the thing with most shonen. It's like their growth as a person mirrors their growth as a fighter, and their power level. But with Gon, it's not quite like that. It's like the power level is the Nen is a physical thing. There's not,
and it's not like it's something that he's fighting against either. That's the other thing I was just thinking about, like in something like Naruto, or like any other thing where it's like, oh, there's something inside of me, and it, like when I get emotional, or like when I'm pushed to the brink, it bursts out and like hurts people that I care about, but I don't want it to. I don't want to hurt people or like put people in danger. I want to get a handle on that. With Gon, there's not like, my emotions are a thing greater than me, and I want to like work with them instead of work against them. It's like, I'm super powerful, and when I get mad, I'll do whatever I want. And I'm not going to feel bad about it or try to control that in any way. I'm just, and not even control it. It's like, in something like Naruto, it's like you can't, the message is like, you can't just like suppress something. It's, you have to like learn to accept it and work with it. And like, that is how you become a person, really. Become like a functioning adult, basically. But with this, that's like just not part of the message of the show.
I never thought about that.
So it's like, his emotions are there, his hypocriticalness is there, and his power is there. But that's not the focus of the journey of the story. Isn't to become the best functioning person that is most acceptable to society. Yeah. It's just to find his dad and go on this journey, and whatever happens along the way happens along the way. Mm-hmm. He's not finding his dad to find a better understanding of himself, or like do any type of work within himself. Like, he's just continuing on as his normal self.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting then when you mirror it with the king, because he's kind of going the opposite direction. It seems like the source of his power is like kind of in a way of going like the obliviousness to, right and wrong, not even right and wrong of, empathy or character growth or
just
growth.
Believing that you were right. And that is interesting with the
it's like the confidence is what gives you power, and the rejection of humanity, I guess, is what gives you power.
Yeah,
but then and that's the same thing with Go. I guess that's what the comment was asking about, like the overlappingness with it.
And how Go. But it's interesting because the ants are not human and have never been treated as such, and they're viewing humans as like an outsidely thing, that when they feel something for the first time, or like when they don't feel things, they wonder about it, and they're like, why? I don't like that I'm experiencing this because this is changing who I am as a person. And then they have to like make that choice of like, are they going to like stick to what they know, or are they going to change and grow and like turn into something else? And that's like part of the question is like, is the king going to let the way that he feels about Komugi? Is he going to let the way that he feels about Komugi? Is that going to extend? Is he going to, just make the exception for her, admit that she is a person that she cares about, and view her in a certain way, and then still be able to like have that divide between her and every other human? Or like, to what extent is that going to bleed out or not bleed out to other people? And if she's a person, then is the king also a person, and does he have a name, and is that something that he should be caring about, or does he need to just keep doubling down and no, I'm super powerful, so it doesn't matter that I don't have a name. It doesn't matter that I choose who lives and dies. All that matters is that I'm superior, and that's it. Like it's the king is kind of having a crisis of what he knows and what he has always thought of himself as, in that he hasn't really thought of himself as anything other than just being the best, versus who maybe he actually is, and like how his like feelings are happening basically. And then someone like Gon, who in a similar way has just always been very sure of himself and always just been doing what he feels is right in the moment and what is right to him, based on his own set of like moral guidelines that seem to flip and flop but he doesn't really think about like, oh, why am I forgiving the bombers? Why am I letting them live and helping them? Oh, because they're just like my friend Killua over here. If you're gonna hurt them, you also have to hurt Killua,
because they, in the end, they're just playing the game that my dad made.
Yeah, and it's like, so he is capable of like, settling down and thinking about things and like relating them to other things in his life, and it's the same with, what's his name, Beanolt, and how he like just, this guy was a horrible person, but he's like, oh, you helped me, so it's fine. But then, some of the ants, it's like, they're doing similar stuff to other things that you have already deemed as acceptable because you yourself approved of them, But
the contradiction doesn't even enter his mind.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's like he doesn't note, he's not noticing these changes, whereas the king is like kind of noticing and like thinking about for himself, I feel this way about this one person. Does that mean I should feel that way about all people? Does the sense that someone can be stronger than me in one thing apply to everyone? Like, he is thinking about that. He's like, as of this last episode, he has rejected that, but then he went in there and saved her life when he was going to kill her. So, he is like very deeply thinking about this, whereas Gon doesn't tend to deeply think about it.
No, yeah, and it's different personalities at the end of the day, but it does make you wonder about, like, I talk about this in our most recent, the Gungi X Komugi episode, of like what Togashi's upbringing must have been like, and what this series must mean to him, or what he like, what is, it seems like he's writing from a place of like a kid wanting freedom and maybe feeling the weight of expectation and the weight of parental expectations or pressure or societal pressures to be a certain thing or do a certain thing. And the whole story is about a kid who is, his morality is being true to himself, and none of the characters are really concerned with like social norms or societal constraints. Like people hustle, like Gon's hustled people for money with the arm wrestling thing. He's fought in fighting ring, and despite being far more capable, like I don't know. There's just like, not that that's like immoral necessarily. I'm just saying like he's done so many things and he's gone so many adventures, and it's all like, it just feels like it's from a place of, childish wonderment and feeling of, I don't know, freedom. This desire of personal freedom not only from a job and bills, but also like from other people's expectation of right and wrong and stuff like that. And what would happen if like this whole world is based on like Netero and Bisky and all these people? They all, like, Bisky was right there beside Gon when they saved the bombers, and that's kind of the whole idea. And so I don't know. It's just interesting. Aside putting beside Meruem, but beside the king.
All I was gonna say was that shit, I lost it. Sorry. That what you were just talking about is basically the entire point of being a hunter in the first place.
Yeah.
Is you're basically like a step above or a step like aside from the law and like normal people.
You're literally outside the law.
It's like you can. Oh, now that you just have this little card, you can basically do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You can be the worst criminals, mass murderers, and like no one will touch you, or you can be an archaeologist, or you can be a chef.
It's literally a get out of jail free card.
It's like you can just do whatever you want, and like that, and it's like you were saying, it's like, what is the point of this story? And it's like, it's not just Gon, it's every character is just living according to how they feel is the best way to live. Kite thought that the best way to live was like not harming other things and like kind of making the world a better place for like all creatures, and like, not disturbing them and not killing them unless you have to, and like everything's a tragedy. And then like Gon has very specific of like just the value of a life depending on if he likes you or not, or deems you helpful to him, or deems you a good friend, basically. So it is just interesting as well with the way that Gon and Killua have kind of like switched it up a little bit, or at least that Killua very clearly right now is stepping into Gon's role in like the previous episode with Ikalgo.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that. Okay. just to hold on to that thought. I'm just going to mention the person who asked about that just to point them out. Baseball Tomorrow, classic viewer. In episode 107, Killua is depicted with a light behind him when he befriends Ikalgo, in the same way Gon had a light shined on his face in episode 85, and Killua said, "You are light." What do you think of this parallel, and what are your predictions about the trajectories of Killua and Gon's character arc? Finish your thought. I just wanted to shout out Baseball Tomorrow.
I guess that's kind of where I was going with this. It's like, what happens when, like, if Killua's whole thing is that he really looks up to Gon and really appreciates everything that he's done for him, basically, and is like not necessarily a blind follower, but basically, like he lets him almost burn his hands off in the dodgeball match, and he like trusts him so implicitly, and they care about each other so much, and they have such a bond. And I guess it just, with this very clear visual depiction and verbal depiction of Killua stepping into Gon's place, it's like, will he not need Gon anymore? What happens when Gon stops being the light in his life? And Killua has like kind of captured that for himself. He has embodied like what he was getting out of Gon. Will that change their relationship if Gon is kind of going down a different path and is no longer the person that Killua thought that he was, or or
maybe they outgrow each other, Well,
I guess that's kind of what I'm saying. Is like they have like they're not, but it's not even that Gon is like shifting into what Killua was. It's just that
Killua got something out of that.
Killua got something. He has like become kind of a new person, and he sees the value of friendship and is willing to put trust into people other than Gon. He is willing to get into a fight with this crazy octopus dude, but then, they're friends, and he is willing to like give that trust and give that friendship in a way that he never would have before. Like I was saying with Gon, of like, he's still that guy who will be friends with people, and Killua is now that guy too. So I guess what I'm saying is like, will Killua, because he's growing so much, outgrow Gon? Like, is Gon going to stay in this like childlike temper tantrum or like hypocritical? Like, is Gon going to grow from that, or has Killua grown and is able to look at things from a more mature perspective, and maybe won't need him anymore? Or is Gon going to like? I'm just anticipating some potential like fallout from that in any way. I know like earlier on I was joking that like, what if he just killed Killua one day? I'm not sure about that, but I do think that there is going to be some kind of change in their relationship potentially, like as this arc comes to an end or in the aftermath of this, you know, it just seems like showing Killua in that way is very, very deliberate and like, you know, indicates something going forward. As for what that is, I'm honestly not sure.
Yeah, because I mean, that's a really interesting prediction. We'll see how that turns out.
Because it is like what I say. It's not necessarily that Gon is like becoming how Killua was. It's just that Killua is becoming
he's grown from that. He's taken something from their relationship and he's paying it forward. And it's paying forward that what Gon helped Killua to do is kind of like what Komugi is helping the king to do in a way of being this like pure embodiment of strength and personality. In a way, Komugi might be getting the same thing from the king, possibly, but the idea being that like the king is, if you think like I was saying in the last reaction, in the 107 reaction, or maybe it was 108, whichever the Komugi Gungi episode, it's like the king is, the poof is like the domineering parent who expects so much. You're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to, you know, bring the family name forward, you're going to live up to your potential.
Be the king.
Yeah, you're going to live up to your potential. This is what you were born for. This is everything that's been working towards, and because I love you so much and I know what's best for you, I'm going to, you know, I want what's best for you. I'm going to do what I can to like make sure that happens, and that's my thing. I made the parallel last reaction to Killua's mom, and it's the same dynamic. So it's very similar. There's a good parallel there where Gon helped Killua to break free from these societal conventions that Gon never had to like learn who he was to break out of. He had a very open upbringing. His dad left, and he was able to model from that what like he wanted to do or what he wanted to be, and he was able to decide what he wanted to do. And his Aunt Mito didn't put up much resistance. She you know, set like a, once you turn this age, once you do this, then, you know, once you catch this giant fish thing, then you'll be strong enough to leave, or whatever she said. So she set sort of boundaries and goals for him, but she never stopped him from pursuing what he wanted. And once he gets out, he meets Killua, who, like the king, has this very, you know, you are the next head of the family. We want you to raise you up. You got all this potential. We see a lot of stuff in you. You need to do this. You need to do that. We're training you from a young age. You got to study. You have to go to school. You have to go to college. You have to do all this shit to make that parallel again. And then he meets Gon, and Gon shows him the freedom of just being a kid and not being an assassin, not doing what your family wants you to do. Like Killua ran away, but learning what it means to be free and what it means to have friendships that are genuine, and, you know, people that you can care about and that can inspire you, and live by your own rules and not by the rules set by the people who are above you or some sort of grander idea of social norms. That's what Killua took from Gon, and that's what the king is kind of going through a similar thing. But yeah, unlike Gon and more like Killua, the king is learning and having to confront, you know, that idea, having to struggle between that idea of what I'm supposed to be and who I am, basically. And Gon never had to do that because he is who he was always going to be. That's why he's such a force of nature. So it's very interesting. It's very, very interesting. That it's there's so much to unpack there, and I'm sure once we get more into the season, more into this batch of episodes, we'll get more of that. I guess I could look for one more question here. I closed everything, of course. What do you think of the Royal Guards? Who's your favorite Royal Guard? Is it Poof?
No.
Or you just hate all of them?
I like Pito as a character.
Pito's funny.
Not that I don't like any of the things that any of them have done, really.
Yeah, of course.
But I do think Pito is the most interesting. Poof is kind of funny, and I like that he is just like a glorified babysitter, basically, you know, like he just kind of chilling out. And then, the other one I don't care about. I kind of wish that there was only two.
I guess we could end it there. That was a pretty in-depth conversation. There's not really any other comments that we kind of talked about the king. We talked about everything. I guess I could ask what was your favorite fight, but like a lot of the fights were like kind of
whatever.
Like there's the one of Gon killing that owl and that bat girl. That owl gorilla guy and that Batgirl, and there's he going fighting that snake guy for like 1 second, then tying him around a tree. There's Hagya versus Morel. The fights are not that crazy this part, but maybe that'll change as we go along.
Yeah.
I guess that's it. I guess there's not much else to say for this one. What do you feel about the pacing?
I think the pacing
overall, like, as you said, you felt slow, but like you don't, do you see a problem with the pacing, or do you feel like it's a little bit too long, a little bit too drawn out?
It's hard to say because it's one of those things, and especially because we had to take some breaks in the middle, it's hard to kind of say, because I literally completely forgot about like when he was fighting that bat and the owl. Like I completely forgot about like, I would say most of like that kind of stuff with just like these one-off ants that I didn't care about. But I do, I don't know, because I don't want to say the pacing's bad, because compared to like pretty much every other anime, especially long ones, you couldn't ask for better pacing than this, you know? Like there's like no very few flashbacks or recaps or like anything at all. So it feels just kind of ungrateful to complain about pacing in a show where
they're actually giving you stuff. That's the difference, I think, between this and other poorly paced shows.
And it's not like anything is necessarily like a filler, and that's why I have like a hard time
nailing it down.
Yeah, kind of pinning down what's wrong with this arc for me. I think that a lot of it was like even the characters that weren't really like filler characters were just didn't have enough of a personality or enough of like a cool fight or enough of anything to really like make like they were literally just forgettable characters. I completely forgot about most of them. So I think maybe it was that, maybe just that there was too many of them, maybe just that we spent too much time like going through so many of them. Like I'm not really sure if there was like one specific thing or if it was just kind of a combination of things that made it seem a little bit less tight than the previous arcs that have been like very snappy, very hitting every moment exactly when they need it to. I don't know.
I think it's that there's multiple setups for different arcs all in a row. That's what it kind of feels like. You get the setup at the start about like the Chimera ants are coming. We meet Kite and we're learning about them. We're infiltrating. We're gathering information. We're we're going with Netero and he's talking to Navin Morel or whatever. Like we're going back and forth and we're setting up this like big monster movie. Oh. And then what happens with Kayabs? Then it's all training arc. Now we're setting up for that, and that's another setup to the arc. And then we're infiltrating, and then this is so there's like 3 different setups to one arc, and they're full setups for their own full separate arc, but they're all, I think, necessary setup for what's coming later. So it's just like a vast number of setup, and like you said, there's not flashbacks. It's not like they're padding it out with a bunch of useless stuff, but there's also like setting up a political narrative with like NGL's underground and like leaking information and all this shit. It's like you're setting up again for like a different story in tandem with your other setup that you're setting up for the actual main conflict.
And what I was also gonna, oh no, did I lose it? I hope not.
I hope not, because you're on camera right now. Everybody's watching you. Close your eyes and meet your teeth and laugh to yourself in the mic and look up at the ceiling.
Shit, what was I gonna say?
Setup, pacing felt kind of slow, hard nailing it down.
Oh yeah, the setup for multiple things. Maybe I was gonna go off of that. It was when you were talking about that I thought of something really good.
Set up for multiple arcs at the same time.
Just give me a second. Oh, this is what I was gonna say. I think that it was also partially to do with that, like, the things that were going on with the ants. We were seeing a lot of things from their perspective, but it was mostly planning. There's a lot of planning on both sides, but with the ants, it was never like, oh no, they're planning this. I hope that our guys kind of knew what the deal with them was the whole time. It was like, the king is coming. And then it's like, the king is going to take over the world. There's nothing like too crazy. So it's just been like us planning for like similar like things that we already know about. We don't know like how difficult it's going to be or like, you know, the exact specifics of it. But you know what I mean?
I think genuinely, so here's the difficult thing. The things you point out as like, I think that, so it's not an uncommon thing to think that this arc is slow and that it's overly bloated. A lot of the general sentiment about that comes from when it was airing, because you had to wait a week for a new episode every single time. So it felt like a bit much. Binging it, I never really felt like it was too slow. I think the only time I felt like it was kind of slow was when they were fighting Knuckle and Shoot and they were trying to like get the permission to go. I felt like that was the only part that like really wasn't super duper necessary, but it was also a training arc, so it is kind of necessary. And, you know, so it's not like, but other than that, like people still have this opinion today where they feel like it's overly bloated. But I feel like a lot of the reason why you think it's overly bloated is just because we've taken so long ourselves to get to this point. It's been like 5 months at this point of us getting through this part of the arc. Like we were still watching in the kitchen when we started this arc, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely were. I think the kite thing happened in the kitchen. Like it's literally been like 6 months we've been gearing up for this. So that's why I think it feels slow. I think if we binged it and were more studious of our reacts, I don't think you'd feel as.
I guess so, but I mean, I guess a lot of my feelings about it like came like during binges too. Like I think actually now after we've taken so long of a break, I don't like. I'm just like talking about it now because that's what we're talking about in the thing. Like, I don't feel like, oh, there's been so much time. But like while we were in the thick of all that stuff, I felt myself
kind of zoning out.
Yeah, like just not as engaged. Because like for pretty much all of Hunter x Hunter, I've been like super engaged with what was going on. But with this, it felt like sometimes it would like grab my attention. I'd get into it. And then it would just kind of like not.
I think a big part of it is just telling it from unnatural perspectives. I think I think that might actually be a big part of it.
I think it might also be with what you're talking about with like the setups. It's like there and not that everything has to like end in a big moment. It's just that there's like it's like kind of just like rolling and rolling and rolling along, and there's a couple of like a little like, you know, episodes like moments of excitement.
But I think that if you track the moments of excitement, they're usually attached to characters we know. They're usually attached to Killua. They're from his perspective. We're following Gon and Kite and Killua, and that's cool. Or like when we take a break and go to the Phantom Troop, that's really cool because we know them and we're like hanging out with our buddies. Like all the big moments, and I think the parts where it feels a lot more engaging, I think track with the perspective where, because other times we're with the ants. So we spend a lot of time developing the ants and we don't really like them. You know, It's interesting to watch this like new species get sentience and like develop a personality. And again, it is set up. Again, if we didn't have all that, we wouldn't have this stuff with the king right now.
Well, that's what I was going to say is like,
so it's all worth it.
It is worth it. But I do think that now that I'm thinking about the thing with the ants is like everything that's going on with the king, we've kind of already seen before with the rest of the ants.
Nope. We have not seen. We saw kind of with Colt, but we have not seen this with other ants.
What I'm trying to say is like whatever the becoming human, but with the king, because it is so internal and we are seeing it from the king's perspective, whereas with the ants we were seeing it as like this group of ants are all dealing with different things of like in their response to like humanity, basically, of like they're looking in books and learning about humans, or they are developing individuality, and
getting their memories,
and they're getting their memories, and they're doing it kind of as in a group setting, even if they're doing it by themselves. But we're not seeing it other than with Colt, who I did really like. We were seeing it sometimes from like close to him and close to his perspective, and I think that's what makes it with Colt and with the king so much more compelling than just this giant cast of ants that are all dealing with different things. I feel like that was not as interesting because it felt in sometimes a little bit more clinical, or a little bit more like I'm just showing all of the different ways in which these ants are dealing with being part human. You know what I mean?
I think the other ants, I think because they got their memories back and because they were people before, it felt more like an amnesia plot. It felt like they were killed and reborn, but really they just like got in a coma, got like body swapped with other things, and then didn't remember they were human. Then then the ones that like are good now are like the good guys, like Colt has remembered who he was as a person and remembered that he is human, and remembers not just like they didn't just like the difference between that and the king, and I think why the king is more interesting is because he is not, as far as we know, from a person. Like he has elements, I think, taken from humanity, but like the whole point of the king is that he's a new creature and that he is the pinnacle of like evolution, and he's not like on the course to like remembering who he was as a person, and that will make him human again. Whereas with Colt, it was like he remembered his sister, he remembered like who he wanted to, that he had all this protective instinct, and then that drove him to like be human now, and now he doesn't want to eat people anymore. It's like with the king, he's learning from the ground up, which I think was the point of the ants to begin with. But yeah, maybe that's it. It's like this confusion between like, are they a new species or are they humans who have forgotten that they were humans and are now like part of this new race? And then there's the other ants which aren't as sympathetic, which don't engage with that part at all, like Cheetu and shit, who just like, that's why people like him feel like non-characters and not really, you don't really care about them, because it's not like they tried to have this, new creature learning, like slowly becoming human, and that's like kind of crazy. But it's also not the amnesia plot of doing all these terrible things, then remembering that you're human, and then sort of reconciling that. It's neither of those. Instead, they're just monsters who just like act silly.
Yeah, so. and that's the thing with Leol and Cheetu and like all of these guys that are like still hanging around at this point. It's like I don't feel like I don't really care about them either way. You know what I mean? It's like, cool, you want to be the king, or you want to betray the king, or you want to do whatever. I don't, they don't have enough to them that makes me like feel one way or another about anything that happens to them or anything that they do. Basically, I'm not sympathetic to them. I don't really hate them.
Yeah,
they're just kind of there.
Yeah,
and I think that was the way with a lot of the ants. And I think what kind of made it felt like it was dragging on to me is just like, when you're going up against things that you don't care about, and you're pretty sure that like the Gon's gonna win, then it's... My
problem with that is that they lost. So your assumption that like Gon's going to win was incorrect from the beginning. You went into it thinking that they were invincible, but there were multiple things. Like I think the tension, because the reason I'm disagreeing so hard is because it was my perspective when I was watching. I didn't feel like that part was like lightning fast and really well paced and like hooked me super hard. So if you didn't, that's okay. I'm not saying that that's wrong for you to feel like that, but that's where I feel like it's more of a personal thing and not something to do with the show, because like that part was so lightning fast, and to me it was so, just again speaking from my perspective, it's like that it was so interesting to me for them to like be on the cutting edge of research of this severe like like in Hunter x Hunter, we don't have these huge threats of like to the world. Like we are the front line of researchers to find out this like actually terrible thing. Nobody knows about this. Like we are out in the jungle. Nobody knows. There's nobody coming to save us. Like we are out here, and we, you know, there are some badass moments where like Kite is really badass, and where Gon and Killua like turn up in against some ants, and that's really cool. But like to me, it always felt like they were really strong, and the odds were stacked, but the odds were stacked against them. And yeah, maybe they'll make it out, but like I don't know, something. I guess I can't really pinpoint it either. But it's just very interesting to me because I had the opposite reaction. That part was so awesome. It wasn't. It seems like you, if I'm listening right, it's like you didn't feel that hook until like 2 episodes ago. So like for the last however many episodes, but it's just interesting because I think like a lot of people's experiences more mirrors mine, where it's like there's a strong build of like Kite, who's a really cool character, and Gon has this connection to him. And if you watch the series the right way, then you have context for that. If not, they kind of fill it in, and Gon feels attached to him properly. Like I still felt attached to Kite. I still felt that Gon was attached to Kite. Even though I didn't read the first chapter before watching. And I was really hooked, and I think a lot of people were really hooked at the beginning, and then it kind of takes a dive. But for you, it seems like it just wasn't
exactly what I was saying.
It didn't. I didn't think that it was. That's why I'm saying this, because I didn't get the impression that was exactly what you're saying. I got the impression that you didn't get that for the whole time, and now you're getting up, whereas before other people have like this roller coaster.
I was saying it's still a roller coaster for me. Like, and like I really liked Kite. I liked all the parts with Kite. I like even that first fight with the ants where Gon kind of loses it on them, and Kite's there, and then he brings out his crazy abilities and stuff. And I liked when Pito showed up, and it was just like that's when it was like on another level. And then Gon and Killua get taken out of the game, and they have to go on their little training arc and stuff. And like that part's kind of like But then I guess what I'm saying is like where I started to like a lot of the ants that I really didn't like weren't even that like first batch where they were like, you know, figuring out things, and they were going in Pockle's brain and like doing all it wasn't even like that part that I really disliked. I guess it was like more of like the second
when
wave.
They were with Palm.
Yeah, I guess when the ants were like awakening their Nen, I felt like was not as good, and like the fight with like the owl and the bat and the snake, and like even with like Chi-Chu and like all of like that, I feel like is where it kind of slowed down for me.
Yeah, that's
personally
fair.
It's like I just didn't feel investment in any of those fights. Like at first when you're like, oh, they're awakening Nen, what's that gonna mean? And then it's just like, okay, it doesn't really mean too much because they're still like untrained with it. And then even when they get abilities, you know, like Chi-Chu, his ability sucked and didn't mean anything. Like this is where it comes back to, it's like a Pito has a really cool ability. It's useful, it's like versatile in multiple ways, and it like stacks up with Pito as a character of being very imposing, very badass, you know? But then a lot of the abilities of these other ants kind of leans into just their uselessness as like you know, they don't have a lot going for them. They just have an ability, and we'll see it, and then they'll get
like which ones? We haven't seen many other.
Gets defeated, and Chi-Chu gets defeated, and like I guess some of the other ants didn't really have like big abilities yet, but
a lot of the other ants didn't really have. I'm forgetting the owl. Like we haven't had many Nen battles with ants.
That's true. I guess I'm still also just remembering at the same time because it has been a while. But I guess what I'm saying is like those are the parts that kind of lost me. But then at the same time, there was a lot of parts that were really good. Like I did really like with Kite.
I'm not asking you to like justify that you did like it. That's not what I'm trying to do. We've had the same conversation probably like 20 times at this point, and I haven't pushed you on it because I want you to just enjoy it on your own. But since we're now doing the discussion, I'm just saying like what I've heard from you multiple times has been like you haven't liked this arc mostly up to this point, pretty much entirely up to this point. That includes the Kite part, and I'm just saying I don't even have a point. I'm not asking you to justify anything. I'm just saying I really liked the start part, and I'm kind of sad that you didn't, because I thought that you would like it a lot more. That's like that like first 5 or 10 episodes or whatever, 8 episodes or whatever it is, from when Kite's introduced to Kite dying is like my personal peak of the whole thing. It's not other people's. A lot of people for this arc, there's stuff that's going to be happening that a lot of people like a lot more, and there is a lot more that approaches that for me. But like that tension building, that like feeling of unknown, that feeling of real exploration, high stake exploration. This isn't a game. This isn't a dodgeball game. This isn't an exam. This isn't, Killua's backyard. This is the jungle in a foreign nation. We are hunters. We are doing research with like one of the best, most powerful people we've seen up to this point, with a really interesting and very powerful power. And he's got this like moral conflict with Gon, but also this deep history with Gon, and just everything about it the whole time there just hooked me so deep. And I'm just sorry that you didn't get to experience that, and I wish that you could have. Honestly, that's it. I'm not asking you to like. You don't have to need to justify that you didn't like it or say that you did, or whatever. I'm sure you liked a couple moments, but for me, like the whole experience was so much better, and I'm just sorry that you couldn't do that. But I know that you will really, really enjoy this next part.
Well, and like I said, like especially in these last few episodes, I felt like things are really getting moving, and I'm feeling like it's that feeling of like at any minute shit could really go down, and I feel like the stakes have really been raised. And also what I really like about like recently as well is like as they're gearing up to this fight, and Gon and Killua kind of have taken a backseat. Well, Killua was like off on his own and had his own little adventure there. But I like that we are getting more of like Nav and Morel, and I really liked them, and we talked about them in the recent episodes as well, of like how Morel is like introduced as this super badass dude, and then he like has completely held true to that. Like nothing has shaken him. He's just been like very calm, very collected, very like he's huge. He like looks very physically imposing, but he plays a very psychological game, and that like that is a very interesting thing. And then with Nav and how he has his glasses, he's got his suit, he looks like he's very a master of his mind, and this and that. But then he gets shaken so badly that he is now out of the fight. And you're like, okay, if that guy got shaken so badly that he's out of the fight, what does that mean? Like, okay, we think Morel is like probably going to be able to, just based on his track record, it seems like he might be able to keep it together. But what if he can't? What if everyone just shows up and then just shits their pants and dies? Like what like how can you go up against something that is like an involuntary reaction from your body of being afraid, And it's not just like they see something and they get afraid. It's like they feel something and they become afraid. It's like they have a status effect put on them that like makes them turn afraid.
Yeah, frightened.
And I think that like that's interesting as well. And with the king and just all these things and how everything's building up with like the king feeling things and everyone having this plan that is pretty much ready to like spring into action. It's just what is going to happen first? Are they going to kill the king before he like decides either way, or is he going to come to some kind of realization and change for himself? Or like, what is any of it on either side going to even matter, And I'm really excited to like get into this next part and see how it all turns out.
Same. Thank you guys for watching. We're gonna go probably watch the next episode right now. Leave a like and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episodes coming up next on BOLDcast, and we'll do a wrap up of the whole arc once we get to the end of this. See you next one, Carson.
I'm Lindsay.
Bye-bye.